Hi there, welcome to podcast episode number 14. We are in the new year and I have some finished objects to share, I have some whips to share, I have some acquisitions to share. I'm wearing my sea breeze sweater, which is very warm and cozy, although it is a tiny bit uncomfortable up here, but we will live with that for the duration of this video. For this episode, all of the finished objects I have were gift knits for the holidays, so I unfortunately don't have any of them with me anymore, but I did take pictures. And the first gift knit that I made for this year was a pair of fingerless gloves that I made using some drops Nepal I had left over. I have had this as a plan for over a year now because I did use this yarn to make a gift knitted hat. And I had a little bit of it left over, not really any significant amount, but it was enough for some fingerless gloves, and I thought it would be a cute gift to give to the same person so they would go with the hat. And I was kind of procrastinating that project a little bit, and then over the summer it obviously didn't happen, so I am quite glad I got that little bit of yarn out of my stash. Since it was such odd amounts and I really wasn't working with a lot of yarn, I didn't use a pattern for this, I just self-drafted something. And the design I came up with is pretty basic. It is just a straight tube, so there's no increases or decreases worked really. And I did some micro stripes because I had a purple color and a grey color, and they kind of look the same from afar, so you have to go really close to the glove to even see that there's stripes in there. But they look very similar, and I had like a good amount of them combined, so I used those to kind of make the background of the glove. And then I put a snowflake design on the top of the hand with the white that I had left over. So the way I knitted it is I started down here on the cuff part of it, if you can call it that. I didn't do any finishings on it either, so I just cast on normally and then knitted a few rows up here. And for a measurement I just kind of used this, so the widest part of my hand, because I was assuming that would fit most people. So I cast on an amount of stitches that fits this part of my hand here, which means that the glove is a little bit loose around here where the wrist is, but since it's not a very long glove, it doesn't really matter. I think if I were to knit a longer one, I would do some increases here to find the final circumference, but since the glove basically ends here, it didn't really matter. So I just knitted some rows and then I put the snowflake here, and while I was doing the snowflake I also left a hole here for your thumb to go through. So I started knitting flat from here on out, so I started over here and then I did the colorwork design, and then on the back side I just knitted in the color of the stripe I was on. And then I cut my yarn here and I reattached the other color and I purled back, and also did the snowflake design here on the back side. And it was kind of annoying to work that way because it was a bit fiddly and you needed to do magic loop for it, and it also left me with a lot of ends to weave in, but I don't see how that could have gone any other way, so that was just what I had to do. And then for up here I connected in the round again very briefly and knitted a few more rows to finish the glove, and that was pretty much when I was out of yarn as well. But I think the design turned out really cute despite me not having a lot of yarn to work with. I actually find that in designing sometimes it's kind of good for me to have restrictions like that in place, just because it forces you to be creative with what you have, and I find that that sometimes makes it a bit easier, because if you have all of the options in the world and you're planning to get new yarn anyway, there's so many colors and so many designs you might do that it's just quite overwhelming to choose something. So if you already have in place, I have this amount of yarn, I have these colors, and I need to do something with that, sometimes it's easier to find a good design for it. And then to finish the glove, I just picked up one row of stitches around the hole for the thumb, and I immediately bound those off just to have more clean finishings there. And I also used that opportunity to make the thumb hole a little bit smaller, because in the beginning it was quite large, it went up to about here. And the reason for that was that I needed to do all of the colorwork flat, because otherwise if I had connected in the round during the snowflake design, I would have had to carry my white yarn all the way across the back of my hand, which would have just made it a little bit more complicated to put it on, because then you would have got stuck in the floats. And also I just didn't have a ton of yarn to work with, so I didn't want to waste any by just having a bunch of floats on the backside, and that's why I decided to just work it flat and then seam it here later. So there is like 2 or 3 stitches on the side here that I just picked up through both fabric layers and then knitted together, and then the rest I picked up separately for both layers, and I just knitted one row. I think I used both colors at the same time, so the purple and the grey, and then I bound the stitches off so, you know, it looks like a finished piece of fabric and not just like the side of your knitting. And I did find that weaving in the ends works better if you do that before picking up the stitches and then doing the finishings, because on the fast glove I did the finishings first and then it was quite the struggle to get the ends to stick in a place where they're not adding a bunch of bulk and are still easy to weave in. So for the second one I think that worked a little bit better, but I have a full video where I explain my process in a little bit more detail if you want to make something similar and follow along. It's not really a tutorial because, as I said, I had very odd amounts of yarn and colors and whatever, but I think it's suitable as a bit of a guideline for if you want to knit something like that. And then for my other finished gift knits, I made socks, which I am not the most excited about making socks usually. I did make one pair of socks sometime last year, and it did not go very well because I didn't really like the yarn that I picked and I wasn't really working with a needle that was very suitable for my project, and it was just, well, my first pair of socks that I had cast on right after I started knitting and then not finished for a long time and then picked back up. So, you know, there were a lot of mistakes in there and gauge issues and whatever, so I was never very excited about knitting socks, but I do find that they're a really cute gift knit. And I did want to make some socks with a yarn that I had laying around from a different project that didn't happen. So I decided I would make the Sunday socks by Petite Knit because I like the clean design of them, and I also like that they had ribbing included, so it could, you know, stretch over somebody's foot a little more easily if you don't know their foot size exactly. Whereas just a stockinette sock, I would be a little bit worried to make for somebody where I can't have them try it on during the process. And I had that planned for a few months already, so I do remember making a gauge swatch for this. And the gauge swatch is made in a stockinette stitch, so it's not in the ribbing part, but in the stockinette part that is just on the underside of the foot and on the heel really. And I held my yarn double. This was my yarn, by the way. It's called Samba. So I held that double and I was able to meet the stitch gauge for the stockinette part pretty well. I was kind of far off for the row gauge, but I just thought, well, I'll adjust that as needed because you can, you know, kind of see how long a sock should be. And the measurements for the foot were given in centimeters anyway, so it didn't really matter what the row gauge was. And then when I cast on the first sock sometime in December, I realized kind of quickly that I didn't think the sizing would work out. So all of the cuff of the sock is worked in 2x2 rib, and you work all parts of the sock on 4mm needles. So I had obviously tried the stockinette gauge, but for the ribbing part there wasn't really a gauge given, so I just wasn't quite sure if I was even within the ballpark of what you were supposed to get as a circumference for this sock. And in the picture of the sock is quite long, so the cuff goes up quite far for your leg, and I just felt like it wouldn't really fit. So even on my leg it was quite tight, and I just didn't think that the people I was going to gift this to were going to be able to wear this sock on their cuff comfortably with the circumference that the 2x2 rib was giving me. So I ripped it all out. So I tried to make some adjustments to the pattern so the sock would fit a bit bigger, but I think I over adjusted it a little bit. So obviously I'm not the most experienced sock knitter, and I think I was doing a bit too much. It would have been fine if I had just adjusted the cast on number of stitches and increased that a little bit and then worked some decreases along the leg and then continued with the normal amount of heel stitches. But I kind of adjusted all of the stitch counts, and in the end I didn't knit until the end. I knitted until like well after the heel, so you could kind of see the shape of the sock already. I just didn't finish the entire length of it. But you could kind of see that at the heel it was just too many stitches, so the heel was just too big and it didn't really look like a normal sock shape, so I decided to rip that one out too. And at that point I had started the sock twice and ripped it out twice, and I wasn't that excited about knitting socks anyway, so I kind of decided to just not do the gift knit because I had other things to gift away and the sock would have just been a little bit of an extra. And then I actually don't know what I was thinking, but like 5 days before Christmas I decided to suddenly do it anyway and just follow the pattern, because at that point, with having knitted almost a full sock, I had figured out that I can't actually make the cuff that long as it was in the picture. I had 200 grams of yarn for 2 pairs of socks, but one of the socks was the largest size and I think the other one was like a 38-39 type of size. So it became pretty clear that with my 200 grams of yarn I couldn't actually do a cuff that even went up the leg that far, that the circumference would be a problem in any way. So I decided to just follow the pattern, which is what I should have probably done in the beginning. And I knitted a pretty short cuff, so it looks more like shorty socks than the proper Sunday socks. And from that point on, everything went pretty smoothly, obviously, because I was just following a relatively easy sock pattern. I think the first sock was kind of annoying to do, but I did start having fun with it by the end. And this is the yarn that I have left over. Obviously, I tried to wind this into balls and, well, I failed at it. And then at some point I thought I'm probably not going to need this much yarn, so I'm just going to give up on that one. And I think I will be getting rid of these leftovers because if you know my story behind this yarn, this was never a yarn I really liked a lot. So I'm glad that it is in a project now and that I don't have to have it in my stash and see it anymore and be annoyed by it. So I don't really know what else I would do with this. I am thinking maybe I should keep like a tiny bit just in case the socks that I made ever like break and have a hole so I can fix them. But I guess at that point I could maybe just find a different yarn in a similar color to fix it. I've also never like fixed knitted items like that, so I don't even know how I would do that best. But I guess we will cross that bridge when we get to it. But me finishing these 4 socks within 5 days, which was a bit insane to do. I don't know why I always do that to myself, but I feel like I just need this tight deadline to be able to get my knitting finished. It was fine. I knitted like a sock a day, and by the end of it my hands hurt, but it was okay. We did it, and I feel like I had a pretty good flow for the sock pattern figured out. I do have some 4mm shorty needles, so they're 23 centimeters in circumference, which was perfect for the sock. I did, however, find that it kind of hurts my hands to work with them for such a long amount of time, just because the needle is very short, obviously, because otherwise it can't bend around to be circular. And that means that you can't really hold the needle with this part of your hand. So if you have a longer knitting needle, like a normal one like this, I at least kind of, hold it like this, so this part of my hand can still support the needle. But since the needle was so short, that wasn't really possible. So my thumb here was doing a lot of heavy lifting holding the needle because I could really only hold it like that. And just after a few days of knitting like that, my thumb here kind of hurt a bit. So I found that for me, the easiest way to do this sock was to start out on the short needles and knit the cuff, which really wasn't that much knitting. It was just like this long in the round. And then for the heel, I switched to these since it's flat anyways and it doesn't matter. And then I could just leave the rest of the stitches on hold on the short needle. And then when I picked the stitches on the side back up, I switched to the short needle again to do the decreases along the side of the heel. Because I just found that a little bit more practical. I did try doing that in Magic Loop as well, but I just found that there were so many stitches on one side of the needle and comparatively few on the other side of the Magic Loop, because you had picked up all of these stitches that you needed to decrease, that it was kind of difficult to get them all together on the needle and then bend the cable around. So I didn't find that the most practical, and I thought it was easier to do this with a short needle. And then once I had all of the decreases done and it was just the length of the sock for the foot, I actually switched to the longer needles again and I knitted that in Magic Loop, which, I don't know, I came to kind of like Magic Loop. I did it so much that it doesn't bother me anymore at this point. And then Christmas came and I gifted my socks away, and then I actually got gifted another skein of sock yarn, which I wasn't expecting in any way. And this is what it looks like. It's a lana grossa yarn, so this is called landlust sockenwolle. And I don't really know anything about this. Does it have a color? 211 if you want to get this one too. It's a self-strapping yarn and it's very like funfetti type of colorful pattern. And I, didn't really have any idea what to do with this except socks. And I do like the Sunday sock pattern from the way it looks. So I thought, since I'm already so in the flow with it and I didn't hate making them anymore by the end of it, I might make a pair for myself. So actually my first whip that I have to share today is another pair of Sunday socks somehow. So I don't know what's happening. I'm like becoming a sock knitter or something, which is not what I was anticipating. I was already saying a few weeks ago that maybe in 2026 I should make some more socks so I can properly become good at it and maybe enjoy it more once I actually know what I'm doing. So now that kind of happened without me really planning to. But I genuinely think that it was a good move to go with a worsted weight sock. I think I would have never really learned to enjoy it if I had kept making socks on such tiny needles. I just didn't find it very fun. Maybe in the future I will. I think if I find a pattern where it's properly worth it, where there's like a really cool color work or lace design or something that I want to have in a sock, then I could imagine doing a sock on a smaller needle. But I feel like if I just want to knit a pair of socks that looks fairly basic, maybe just some stripes or whatever, I am much better off using a like higher weight yarn. So for this pair of Sunday socks, I decided to make a few adjustments to the pattern because I feel like I'm fairly experienced with it now and I am in a better place to make adjustments to it. The first thing that I did differently is this year, because I started with a provisional cast on, I just found that it was kind of difficult to estimate how much yarn I would need for one sock. So as I said, this is what I have left over from my first two pairs. So I could have made them longer in the cuff, but there was really not a good way to do that once I was finished. So I did a provisional cast on here, and then I just knitted a few rows of the cuff so I could try it on more easily. And then I immediately went into the heel and knitted the length of the sock and the toe. And then I did that twice already. So we are quite far into this project. The main parts are already done. And then here I am currently trying to pick my stitches from the provisional cast on back up because I have this much yarn left over and now I can just keep going for the cuff for however long I have yarn for. I think that makes the most sense for a sock because obviously I'm going to want to use up this entire skein because otherwise I'm just going to have like 10 grams left over that I can't do anything with. So I'm just going to make the sock however long it gets. And I think the second adjustment that I will probably make to this, considering how much yarn I have left, is I will work some increases in the cuff because I still feel like for wearing this comfortably, the circumference that you're starting out with for the cuff is just not great for how long the sock is. So I will probably work some increases so this fits around my calves more comfortably because this is fine for my ankle, but I think if it gets like properly long, I want it to be a bit bigger. And then I have already made a last adjustment, and that is here for the toe. For the first two pairs of Sunday socks that I made, I think the toe box is fine, but I don't love it. I feel like it's very long considering what the sock looks like generally. And I'm not exactly sure if that is because of my row gauge with the yarn that I had or if that is just part of the pattern, because I don't feel like it looks that long in the picture, but it is quite a few rows even for the normal row gauge. So I didn't really like that the toe basically started like up here and it just looked a bit goofy. So I decided to not do as many decreases in the toe. I think the reason why the toe is shaped like that in the original pattern is that you don't need to really close the hole in the front in any way. You just put the yarn through and then pull it and then weave it in. So you don't really, do anything for the toe, which makes it very easy and very beginner friendly, but I feel very confident doing Kitchener stitch. And I don't really mind doing it either, especially not for so few stitches. So I decided to just not work as many decreases. So I just made this part, the foot part, a centimeter longer. And then I only worked, I think, 5 decrease rows in total. So I worked 3 decrease rows with 1 just knitted row in between and then 2 decrease rows back to back. And then I Kitchener stitched this close. So the toe is a lot shorter and I feel like it looks more proportional to the rest of the pattern. And also like it fits toes a little bit better because the other toe that I did was very pointy as well, and obviously it kind of pulls over your foot in a way that fits it in the end, so it's not really an issue for the pattern, I would say, and I get why it was designed that way. I just prefer this type of toe construction a little bit better. And now for this pattern I really just need to pick up my provisional cast on and keep doing 2x2 rib and an occasional increase if I feel like it. I am struggling with this part a little bit. I only really watched one tutorial on how to do provisional cast on. I have never really done it before. I think I've learned how to do it, but I've never really used it in a project. So I refreshed my memory with one tutorial and I just did the cast on, and in the tutorial they didn't explain how you would pick up the stitches later, so I just kind of did it how I assumed I would do it, and it didn't work out very well. So I knitted 2 more rows, but somehow I am next to the stitch, so I feel like I almost picked up the bar in between the stitches somehow, and it almost looked like all of these ribbed columns were moved half a stitch over, so it just looks a bit goofy, and that was definitely not the correct way to do that. So I'm gonna rip out the 2 rows that I did and try if I can pick this up a little more sensibly. Maybe I will try on this sock. and watch another tutorial on how to do that. I did since look up some more, and I did like do the cast on the correct way technically, so it should be possible to somehow pick this up in a reasonable way as well. I just haven't figured it out yet, but that will be a fun challenge for this evening. And then I actually have 2 more whips. First, let's maybe talk about my favorite long-term whip, which is also a petite knit pattern. So I'm sorry about that. This episode is very focused on petite knit for some reason. This is my Esther jacket. It is coming together. I am pretty certain last time I showed this to you, I had just connected under the arms, not really in the round, but I was about here. And I actually don't have a ton of updates to give you about this because I just worked the same repeat in the round a billion times. So this is how long it is now. And this is kind of what it's looking like. So nothing incredibly new there. Did I turn it inside out? I did turn it inside out. I keep doing that. Will this be a reversible project in the end? I mean, you probably wouldn't really see a difference unless you're standing right next to it, but it's kind of reversible. I'm only realizing that now. Just a question of which side do I want to weave in my ends. So this is what it looks like. Excuse me. It looks like it definitely needs to be blocked, but other than that, it's going pretty well. I feel like for this project, I really just need to sit down and focus on it, and then I'll actually make reasonable progress on it. I keep putting this away and then not working on it for a few weeks, and then I pick it back up, and then I'm obsessed with it for like 4 days. One of these pattern repeats, and they're actually quite long. Like, I think this should be 1 pattern repeat. I did in 1 evening, so in 1 sitting I knitted that much, and it's long rows, you know, and you need to purl quite a bit, but somehow it's so much set up somehow to like get the pattern out and get the chart out and like sit down and have this huge project somewhere and get back into the pattern repeat, which I am better at now, but still. So for now I've just been using the chart of one of these shoulder panels here, and I've been copying the pattern repeat from that, and it's been working fine. The pattern is a tiny bit frustrating to work with, maybe. I don't know if frustrating is the right word. It's just, it could be so much easier to use with so little more effort on the pattern writing side, I feel like. So pretty often there will be like half a sentence that I just find to be missing, kind of, where there's information that I would need, but that's not really explained in the pattern, and then I have to refer back to the picture, or I have to kind of figure it out on my own. And it's fine, I can do that. So I don't always find this pattern to be the best to work with, but it's definitely possible to complete this project. And I'm actually pretty excited to move on to the next part. I think I have about half a pattern repeat left for the body length. I was finally able to try it on. I did also put it on bigger needles, or on a bigger cable. I believe last time I complained that I was keeping this on 60 centimeter circulars, and I don't know why I did that. I found some very much longer ones. I think this is 120, and yeah, I'm able to just leave this on the needles and try it on, which is pretty nice compared to working a project in the round. That's so far the only advantage I have found for doing a cardigan over a sweater, that you can more easily try it on while also leaving it on the needles. And it does fit me really well. I'm actually pretty happy about the amount of positive ease I have, especially considering that I did in the past have trouble with petite knit sizing, and that I did switch size in the middle of this project once. So I started doing a large in this, and then I switched to a 2XL actually, because somehow, I still haven't measured my gauge, I should do that, but somehow my gauge wasn't really working out with the circumference I was supposed to reach. So I made some adjustments there, and now it's fitting me really well. And lengthwise, I wanted to kind of hit at the top of my hips maybe, so I should be fine doing another half a pattern repeat and then doing the hem. And that's actually quite cool, because that'll be a bit of something different. So far, this project has been a bunch of the same pattern repeat, which was really not that bad up here. Usually I get a bit bored of these types of projects quickly, but up here there was enough like shaping and picking up stitches and reattaching on the other side going on that it didn't really bother me. And even the body went a lot quicker than I was expecting. It is obviously still a lot of just knitting the pattern repeat, but because there is something different going on in every row, and the pattern repeat is large enough that you can't remember it as well. So I've worked, for example, the medal sweater before, where I did have that problem that I got kind of bored of the pattern repeat quickly, but the pattern repeat was also a lot smaller there. So while this is less complicated, maybe even I would say, it is at least a bit bigger. So you do need to focus a little bit more on this. I was kind of hoping I could finish this project until the new year, and then in between I was actually hoping I could maybe finish it for Christmas and wear it on Christmas. Neither of those happened, obviously, but I do think currently I'm on track to finish this relatively soon. I am having fun with it and I do want it as a finished object, and I am also hoping I can still wear it this winter, so that would just be pretty cool. And well, we'll see. I don't want to stress myself out. I also did cast on another quite extensive project, which I can talk a bit about now. This does actually already reach into my acquisitions section, but I did get quite a lot of yarn for Christmas, as do most people who knit on here, just because it's a very easy thing to ask for when people want to know what to give to me. And I got 2 sweater quantities of yarn. So the first one is this. This is istex léttlopi. It is an Icelandic wool and it is kind of rustic, I would say. A lot of people have said very nice things about this yarn, so I really wanted to try it. I have been wanting to try it for a while, but you know, it's not necessarily something I would buy myself a sweater quantity of just on a whim. So I'm very happy to have this now. I got mostly this white as a main color, and then I have this dark blue as a contrast color, and I have a tiny bit of this red as a contrast color as well. So that kind of looks like my channel colors, I was hoping. And I think it's a cute combination. And I want to design a sweater with this, so I did do some math already and I did try to cast on. I didn't get very far yet, so this is all I have to show for now. Wow, so tangled already. How did I do that? Ah, there we go. Okay, this is what I cast on so far, so it's not a lot yet, but this is gonna be the neck. So not the neckband, which I will add later, but you know, like around here. And now I'm already studying the short rows, which I already made a mistake on, so this project so far not going too well, but we will see. The plan for this is I want this to be a saddle shoulder sweater that like has the saddle up here and then has a drop shoulder continuing further down the yoke. And I would like the main part of it to be the white, obviously, and then I did get this red for maybe a little star up here, like just a little splash of color work. And with the blue, which I do have a little bit more of, I would like to have one continuous thicker stripe going from the cuff down the underside of the arm and down the side of the body to the hem. I think that would look kind of cool. It's not necessarily something I see in knitted sweaters a lot. It's more like a typical store-bought cotton sweater maybe type of design, and I would really like to integrate that into knitwear. I think that would look pretty fun. It does make the construction of it a tiny bit annoying maybe. I will see how the experience is actually knitting it. I don't think it's going to be too bad because it's not overly complicated, so it'll still be a pretty fun project, but you can't really knit it in the round very well because of these 2 stripes down here, just because you would either have to do intarsia in the round, which is pretty complicated, I think. I've never actually done it. I have come close to doing it a few times because I have had multiple designs now where I was considering doing that, and I like did learn how to do the technique, but I never actually used it then because I never found it to be very compelling. I just think it doesn't look like a fun thing to do, especially not for the entire length of a sweater. Maybe if you want to include like a tiny piece of color work somewhere, then that's okay, you can do it for a few rounds, but if you have to knit the entire body of a sweater like that, I just don't believe it would be very fun. Also, there's like the color blocks are quite large, so there would just have to be a lot of pulling your yarn through somewhere, and it didn't seem like a cool thing to do. And then the other option would have been to knit it bottom up in pieces and then seam it, which would have probably been the most straightforward design approach, but it's not the most fun knitting experience. So I am pretty certain I figured out a way where you can cast on up here for the neck and you can work the yoke in the round at least, mostly, at least until like here, and then you would have to split for the armhole here and then knit the body panels flat as well, so the front panel and the back panel. So you can have the blue on both sides and then the white in the middle and then seam it down the arm. So that would give you 2 seams to do in the end, which isn't great, but that's just going to be the way it is because I don't really know how else to design this in a reasonable way. So we will see. I hope this will still turn out a fun project. I think so. I don't really mind knitting flat as much. I think I'm just getting too in my head because a lot of people don't like knitting things flat, but I don't hate it totally. And I also think seaming is kind of fun. Maybe I want to at some point make like a really traditional sweater, like a very old pattern where you actually knit everything in pieces and seam it. I did make the Elliot sweater last year, which was kind of like that. I don't think it was like a traditional old pattern, but you did knit all of it in pieces and seam it. But for now I'm gonna worry about my short rows. I will need to do some increases in here, so I should probably figure out the math for that because I did definitely forget about it when planning this. Other than that, I don't have a ton to say about the sweater yet because, well, obviously it doesn't really exist yet. We'll see how far I get on this. I am just hoping I can still finish my Esther jacket and won't completely focus on this one. I do usually prioritize my own designs over other people's patterns, which does make sense. But I think the Esther jacket should be doable now that I have so much of it done and I, am familiar with the pattern repeat, and well, we'll see. I will have to calculate before I continue on this anyway. And then for the rest of my acquisitions and plans, I did get another sweater quantity of yarn, so this is the rest of it. This is actually probably the more interesting part. This is some knitting for olive merino in the color plum, which I'm very excited for because I've never worked with their merino yarn. I have worked with their silk and their mohair, but I just found their merino quite expensive comparatively. So if you look at silk yarns, for example, I feel like they're all kind of within the price range that the knitting for olive silk is as well. And I've kind of found the same for the mohair. There are some cheaper mohairs you can get, but this is still like, I would say, a pretty good price. But for the merino, like I get that this is like really good yarn and that it's ethically made and all of that. So I do understand where the price comes from. Just it is pretty easy to get cheaper merino from elsewhere. So I have never worked with this so far. So it was a cool Christmas gift to get and I'm very excited to try this out. My original plan was to hold these two together. I don't know how well that would work. I will have to knit up a swatch, but I really fell in love with this purple. I think it looks great. And I was looking for a mohair to go with it. And they didn't really have a purple mohair, at least not one that was this dark purple. They had, I think, some like lighter and dustier types of purple, but I just didn't want to wash this vibrancy out with something dusty. And I also liked that it was dark, so I didn't want to add a lighter mohair. And I kind of struggled picking which mohair to go for. I could have also gone for like a darker red, but I don't look the best in red, so I didn't want to introduce any red undertones into this. And I eventually decided to go with this midnight one, which is a very dark bluish grey, I would say. It looks almost black, but it's kind of hard to tell what this color is supposed to be. Maybe it's supposed to be black because it's called midnight. I don't know. But online on the picture it looked like they would go together really well. It definitely wouldn't wash this out or make it any lighter or redder. So I think this should maybe work. They are very different colors though, clearly, so I would need to knit up a swatch, which I haven't yet done, and see how they look together. However, if they don't look good together, it'll still be fine. I can always knit some mohair thing out of the mohair that I have, and then I could use this merino to make a bit of a tighter sweater. My original plan was to hold them together and just make a more oversized normal sweater. I was looking at the stripy affair sweater by Veronica Lindberg a while ago, which does use this combination. She does hold 2 strands of mohair, but I think I can probably get gauge with just these two held together, and I should have enough yarn for that too. So maybe I will make that one if they look cool together. Maybe I will have some kind of design idea. Maybe they will be separate pieces. I don't have a ton of plans for this yet. I do have the stripy affair sweater in the back of my mind, so in case I don't figure out anything else, it can definitely be that. So I don't have the yarn laying around and have to worry that I won't find a project to make with it. Also, this is such a popular combination that I think that even if I decide on something else, there is definitely a sweater out there that uses these exact yarns that, I will enjoy. But for now, I don't have any immediate plans for this yarn yet. I did also get a yarn winder, which is very exciting because I was winding my yarn by hand up until now. So I did this method where you hold the yarn with these two fingers and then you wrap it around your thumb and keep turning it around and wrapping and turning it around and wrapping, and I did a lot of that, and it took a lot of time, as you might imagine. I did get pretty good at it by the end, so I did make quite nice balls of yarn, but it's not the most fun. And I actually got an electric yarn winder too, so it's been my pride and joy. It's really fun to watch. You just kind of thread the yarn through a little contraption, and then you turn up the button and it will wind it up for you in the span of like 2 minutes automatically. And it's really cool to look at, and so much faster. It does need some supervision so it doesn't get tangled, but it's been working pretty well. So I've already wound up my léttlopi here into this, and I've also wound up my sock yarn that I've been working with. This is what it looks like. So that's been quite fun. It does pull the yarn a bit tight, I find, so for the sock yarn it was fine, but I guess because this is so grippy, it like sticks to itself really well. I found that these balls are maybe a bit tight for how tight I would like them to be wound up, so it becomes kind of difficult to pull the yarn out of here. You have to like yank on it pretty hard, but well, I'm fine if it doesn't work perfectly for any yarn, as long as I don't have to do it by hand anymore. That was all of my acquisitions. I don't know if I have any more plans really. I think for now I just want to focus on getting the Esther jacket done so I can still put it on this winter. And I want to obviously focus on my own design. I did mention, I think 2 weeks ago in my video where I kind of reflected on my knitting in 2025, that I have some like bucket list items for 2026. I think I included a skirt in there, so I would like to think about that at some point. I don't know if it's very immediate, and I did also include that I want to design a graphic t-shirt, which I think I should probably already be thinking about at this point, even though it's January and I probably won't need to have it ready before the summer, but with me like planning it out and knitting it up myself and maybe getting it test knitted, I think I should give people like a few weeks to knit it up and everything. So once I kind of get done with the planning phase of this sweater that I'm making, I might already start thinking about that. It's a bit weird to do this pattern design thing because you kind of have to be ahead of the seasons and knit everything in the wrong season. So that's not super practical, but we will see how that goes this year. I'm not the most experienced with all of this yet. I have 3 designs out by now. I will now go and do some sweater math, figure out how to pick up a provisional cast on properly, and maybe do some rows on my Esther jacket. And I hope you have a fun project on your needle as well. I always love to hear what you're working on, if you have any cool recommendations for designers that I might not know yet, if you have any recommendations for sock patterns that would be interesting for this year maybe. If you've made a skirt before, I would love to know that, because it seems like a very easy but also really intimidating project at the same time, because it seems like so much knitting. So if you've made one before, let me know how that went and what pattern you used, if you used any. And I will see you next time.